Good day and welcome to this week's episode of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell Donawa, and once again, we are happy to bring the law and you. Of course, you can stream us on all major platforms. Of course, also our podcast at Strictly Legal with Rondell Donawa. Today, we are going to speak about vaccination. Yes, it is here. Of course, you would have heard the Prime Minister signal, not his intent, but of course, laid the foundation in terms of what the government has done to combat or to try and deal with the issue of flattening the curve in Trinidad and Tobago with respect to COVID-19 pandemic that has been ravaging the world for the last almost 2 years. And what was interesting to note is that he mentioned particular countries that has moved towards the mandatory vaccination policy, whereas it is either in the workplace or countrywide, such countries as Austria, New Zealand, etc. And the question remains, will this happen in Trinidad and Tobago? We note also that the vaccination rate, while yes, it has increased, it has some ways plateaued. And of course, we have to weigh, or the question is weighing voluntary, mandatory vaccination versus public health. And we are looking in terms of holistically, but more importantly, in the workplace. And with me, I do have a guest, my colleague, Mr. Rajiv Rickhi, attorney at law, who will speak on this particular topic. Just a bit about Rajiv. Rajiv has been practicing for over 12 years in private practice. He has served his country as former member of the Green Fund Advisory Committee under the Ministry of Environment and Water Resources. He has also made contributions towards publications regarding recent updates to criminal law, which was featured in the Lawyer magazine. His practice is predominantly in the High Court and the Court of Appeal in relation to civil matters, personal injury, insurance law, and other contentious litigation. He also practices, his practice involves tax appeal, industrial relations, equal opportunity commission issues, and other employment relation issues. So Mr. Rajiv Rickhi is very, very much qualified to speak on this topic. So without further ado, I want to welcome Rajiv Rickhi. Good morning.
Good morning, Rondell.
How are you?
A very nice introduction. I'm happy to be here, and a good morning to all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago.
Certainly, certainly. And of course, we are happy to have you here because this is a topic that has been on persons' minds a lot. It's just been going on and on and on and on and on. And the issue remains, what exactly is voluntary vaccination or versus mandatory?
Well, let's start with the world view.
Yes.
The global view right now is that you have voluntary vaccination in one hand, where I could go to a health center, I could choose Pfizer, Sinopharm, Astra, or what is being implemented in certain countries, mandatory vaccination, which is the government stipulates you have to do this or else you could be fined. It's a very serious issue. I know the Prime Minister spoke about it recently. He talked about the countries around the world. We have so many different opinions, and certain countries are actually getting very serious about it. Austria has actually full-on said mandatory vaccination. President Biden in America has now gone on to say federal workers, any companies that have over 100 workers also have to be vaccinated. There was even a judgment recently in a Texan court, I believe it was Bridges, that dealt with nurses who said, we cannot be forced to be vaccinated. And the courts actually said, no, you have a choice. You could either resign or you can be vaccinated. Recently in Canada too, now we have travel is being restricted. New Zealand also has the health and disability sectors have to be fully vaccinated. So it is something that is a hot topic all around the world. I mean, it's a nightmare that has been continuing for the entire globe for nearly 2 years.
Yeah.
There's a lot of feelings about it. I know that Trinidadians themselves too are feeling this strife, and we're tired, and the economy feels down. But I want to say something. I know we are resilient people. And
Indeed.
even if we have to face these issues, I have confidence that we want to be each other's keeper. I believe in people of Trinidad and Tobago, but I do believe that education is important, especially when it comes to the vaccines. Because, it's actually one of my favorite comedians, as Dave Chappelle was talking about, that we live in the age of spin. The age of spin being, how can I care about any one thing when every 2 minutes, there's another topic on.
Yeah.
First there was COVID, then there was Delta. While I could speak personally.
I know
for
there's
me.
Omicron or Megatron or whatever they call it.
well, we believe Megatron will be next.
Yeah.
so that's the question. How much can we be allowed to care? And it is important for education because I understand the views of both sides. I've been listening to everyone talk. I don't even like to label people as anti-vaxxers. I prefer to say vaccine hesitancy because they are looking at the situation and saying, well, I think I need more data. The problem is this is such an unprecedented situation for us in the world with globalization. This situation is changing all the time. Mutations are happening all the time. And it's going to affect the workplace eventually, whether the Prime Minister actually puts in mandatory vaccination as yet, which is, I think he's hesitant to and trying to encourage us again. Voluntary. Let's try to do this. Let's be in this together. That's where I think we're moving to.
No, you make a point, particularly with there are no anti-vaxxers, as you call it. Mm-hmm. But of course, in terms of I believe vaccine hesitancy and anti-vaxxers are two different concepts. In that anti-vaxxers are persons who outright, I'm not taking a vaccine because of whatever religious reasons, it is a mark of the beast, all these various things that are coming to surface. Rightfully so, everyone is entitled to one's opinion under the freedom of speech on the Constitution. But you mentioned in terms of the workplace, and it's important to note that the President of the Industrial Court, Mrs. Deborah Thomas Felix, stated, more particularly, most countries in Trinidad didn't make most companies, yes, in Trinidad didn't make that a requirement before the pandemic started. If there's a reason for it, it can be made a condition of employment for new employees, but you cannot dismiss an employee under a contract of employment that doesn't require it. So she set the tone, right, for mandatory, well, not mandatory, but stating that employers cannot impose a mandatory vaccine. Well, what do you have to say about that particular issue?
Well, you see, firstly, we have to look at the Constitution before there are different statutes and different acts that affect the workplace and our lives generally. We have the Constitution, we have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Now, many times we throw around these rights. A person has a right to legal advice. Back in the day when we were going to police stations, that's the first thing we say. This man has a right to his lawyer. He has a right to legal advice. We have a right to due process. But certain rights can be limited depending on, and this is a global position. I believe it was the European Human Rights Courts actually spoke about this in an older case. And they were dealing with, I think it was tuberculosis at the time. And they said that a person attempted to sue based on the fact that he was forced to be vaccinated. And they said that you have a social duty to the world as well. It's not just about you. And that's how we have to look at this whole pandemic and the situation of, I have my feelings. And I believe, and it's the same way. I mean, currently I think in Trinidad they have this issue going on with cremations. And they're talking about constitutional rights. And I have the right to the Hindu religion believes that I have a right to bury and burn, right, in the open cremation site. The government has taken a view that right now that is banned, and it's before the courts. It is a battle over constitutional rights. No determination has been made, and that's the funny thing about the situation we're in.
But then constitutional rights, what is the balance of probability, or rather not balance, but proportionate with respect to public health? I'm sure that's the argument of the state.
Exactly. So perhaps it would be, I can't speak for how the case will turn out, but I guess it'll have to go down to medical evidence. It will have to go down to, again, scientists analyzing if you have an open pyre for a COVID person, can it spread that way? I mean, the case has to be determined, the law has to be there, but we're down to the same situation. How do I feel? As a person, how do you feel when you say people talking about the mark of the beast? And I respect everyone has a view. But then when it comes down to an employee in a workplace, and this is where we go down to the OSHA Act, an employer has a duty to keep his employees safe.
Yes.
What happens when you have vaccinated people and unvaccinated people in a workplace? And we do know, scientists are saying that the mutations come more from unvaccinated people. I mean, that's the data. I'm not a scientist, I can't say for sure, but that's what they're saying. So you have vaccinated people saying, well, I feel uncomfortable. You have customers who might say, I am uncomfortable. Now we have the safe zones. The safe zones themselves actually are a form of implementation of mandatory vaccination in a sense.
Yes.
You can't go to a safe zone unless you're vaccinated.
And that goes for customers and employees.
Exactly. Yeah. So in a sense, it's already been introduced, but mandatory vaccination is not necessarily new. I mean, the way it's looking now is as if it's new and we're getting excited and we're like, wow, this is crazy. But in the past, for schools, you had measles, you had yellow fever. So
this is an argument. I mean, in fact, persons are saying, well, that was years of research before those vaccines were implemented. But really and truly, was it really years of research? Because at the end of the day, when we got vaccinated, those vaccines were out long before. What about the first set of pupils or children who got vaccinated? How long ago or how long was that research?
Exactly.
Medicine has evolved, etc.
Exactly what you're saying. And the thing is, we are in a point in history where our decisions matter. What we decide to do, whether it's herd immunity, whether it's, we don't know, human beings love to be in control. It's the truth that we have medicine, we have technology, we like to feel like we could control our lives. Sometimes things happen and spiral us into a state of fear, but we should not be afraid because we have to have faith in our people. We have to have faith in scientists. We have to try. You know, there are different solutions coming up. If we only say that we are afraid, then we won't live our lives. COVID will win, and we have to make certain decisions. And I know it's not an easy situation for any country.
But let's deal with the Occupational Safety and Health Act. Now, an employer can say, well, at the end of the day, I have to look at employer's liability, vicarious liability, etc. And I have to state, okay, my particular employment, because I interact a lot with public, I have to look at the well-being of staff and public. How does the employer implement mandatory vaccination on their staff under the OSH?
So you see, here when it comes to risk assessment, under OSHA they talk about risk assessment. So if you are an unvaccinated person, your employer will have to decide, can you do this job remotely, right? And now that affects many different jobs. Yeah, and will it cause an undue hardship on the employer himself having to implement that? So that is where we have the first question. For example, nurses in a hospital. I don't think they could do their job remotely. I mean, this is just, again, nothing has been decided as yet. It's just the view, the overall view of what's happening now. Food places, that is on hands. That is not remote viewing. Lawyers, for example, we could actually work remotely. We have been. Virtual courts, virtual trials have been going on. But each situation you have to deal with independently when looking at the risk and balance assessment. And now that also leads to certain claims that might come up on discrimination. You know, so that essentially falls into the Equal Opportunities Commission and what could be determined as discrimination.
Is it that because of the fact that these types of matters has not been tested in the court, that we have no precedent set, and therefore it's more of legal opinions or opinions of person, etc.? Because I would, I would think by now, at least let's look at the safe zone. I thought that maybe there may have been a challenge by employees. I don't know if that may have happened, but I'm sure if it did, it would have been in public domain. That certain employees of certain safe zones may say, well, at the end of the day, you are infringing on my constitutional right. Under what particular sections of the Constitution?
So what you're saying is right. I mean, there hasn't been any proper case law. I mean, I'm not saying it may not be before the courts. We don't, at least it's not within our knowledge as yet. But no one has made a determination. That's what makes this whole pandemic, it's the same thing. The pandemic feels out of control. Our work situation can feel out of control. The case law has not set anything as yet. So it's in a sense, an exciting new development in how the case law will transform. For example, if we're talking about discrimination and somebody brings a case, if they say, well, I have a medical reason and I cannot take the vaccine, right? They can accuse someone of saying you're being discriminatory against me. But then that also, the rights under the AOC is not absolute at all. They have to balance, again, undue hardship. Are we able to have you here for a fundamental job? It goes down to religious belief. And again, some people say discrimination could be on your religious belief, but it comes down to the balancing act of the undue hardship on the employer. You know, are you able to manage this? And I mean, even with religious belief, that is a little different because I believe the Vatican might have actually had their workers vaccinated. I think that was something I heard. So then how do we say that, one religious belief versus another religious belief? How do we balance that? That's something that no one can really answer as yet, and it has to be tested in the courts.
Right, so therefore, and of course, I mean, you mentioned disability, religion. Let's say religion. Religion it's more of I would say subjective. How does in terms of a challenge, how does a court decide, okay, whether religion outweighs public health concerns?
Well, you see, that's a very interesting point of view, and again, I'm not the judge. I haven't decided that in any capacity.
But of course, you are an attorney who may at one point, at some point, fight a case with respect to religious discrimination or public health safety, and how other jurisdictions will deal with it. But in terms of Trinidad being a multi-religious society,
we are a beautiful melting pot, and that's what makes us special. It also makes things a little bit difficult because everyone has a different view, but we're harmonious in it. But again, I think actually the determination about the cremations would give some guidance. Only when that matter is kind of determined will we have an idea of the pushback between public health interest and religious belief.
But then that is relation to burning of bodies.
Yes.
But what about religion in terms of taking a vaccine?
Well, you see, that's different because again, it comes down to, is your belief valid? For example, it could be like this. Have you been vaccinated before for other things? And if you have that subjective mindset, is that enough? And it may not be. I mean, if we test it in terms of the public interest test, in terms of other countries, it may not be. That's not sufficient when it comes down to the entire world view right now. But again, it's not been determined. It's actually an exciting development to look at, but we're still waiting to see.
Now, under the particular constitution, our constitution is written, is codified. Unlike Britain has an uncodified constitution. Now, under the constitution, what particular sections or what can be argued in terms of breach of constitution? Because you always hear, oh, I have a right, and all these various rights and responsibilities.
Yes. So again, we go back to Section 4 of the Constitution that talks about your right to respect for private and family life, freedom of conscience and religious belief and observance, and freedom of thought and expression. But again, the problem with that is untested. But when we look at the global position, and there was a case in Belgium, I believe it was 1983. Again, I'd repeated it before, that dealt with the tuberculosis. And they actually have similar articles with their human rights, the European Union. And that's Article 8, that talks about your right to your body and your right to yourself and family life. And the courts did say that, you have a social duty. You are a person, and although you're an individual, you're part of the collective, you're part of the whole. And if this is to keep everyone safe and to stop a disease, it can, even if it is, even if your rights are there, it can still be infringed upon by the state. That was actually seen globally. So that is at least the global position.
But usually when legislation are passed or certain bills, it will usually have in the preamble, although it infringes on your Section 4 and 5 of the Constitution, the bill can still pass.
It can still pass. Again,
and enacted and assented and proclaimed, yeah.
Yes, again, no determination has actually been made by the Honorable Prime Minister. I mean, that's a tough situation because we have the globe. We have, I think it was the European Commission president actually told the other EU countries now, hey, we have to consider mandatory vaccination. And that is a big deal because remember, for people who believe, okay, these are my rights, you're fighting the system, you feel like you're being attacked. And that's what we're trying to hope that education can help. Because we believe that if people, I have faith in people that if you give proper data, and sometimes the data may not be the best that you want to see, but if you try, we have to believe that people could look at the data and try to come to a determination and understand this is for the interests of everyone.
But Rajiv, I think at this point, there are a lot of data out there, and I think at this particular point, if someone is hesitant to take the vaccine, I don't think they will take the vaccine again, to be honest. Because if we had, I think at this point in time, you would have seen an increase, I believe.
So I respect your opinion. I would respectfully disagree for the simple reason that it goes back to Dave Chappelle, one of my favorite comedians, Age of Spin. how do we know when we're constantly bombarded by certain information?
Right.
And I think that we have to actually start doing a little more, perhaps locally, to talk about it, to help educate, because that's the problem. You will have WhatsApp saying, like, it's the mark of the devil. You have all these things constantly on Instagram, Facebook. We live in the age of social media. Social media could take even an untruth. If it's shared 1 million times, it becomes a truth. And that's what we have to try and avoid. We have to try and bring back logic to a situation that has gone out of control.
Perspective at the end of the day, right? So now let's look at the issue of mandatory vaccination to gain employment, right? Now, can one argue, because obviously if you already have a term, yes, you have an employed person who you cannot mandate a vaccination. But then you have someone who is applying for a job, and one of the requirements is that you have to be vaccinated. Can there be a challenge there? Because, and why I ask that, because of the fact that you are now looking at, one is infringing, you are infringing my right under the Constitution for freedom of choice, right? Versus someone who is employed can decide that they don't want to be vaccinated because the law allows for it. So therefore, what sort of challenge there is legally to deal with persons who are now being employed or who are now looking for employment, but one of the requirements is that you have to be vaccinated? Isn't that not discrimination?
So that's a very good question, and again, undetermined before the courts. That's the exciting part of it. But the president of the Industrial Court did give a preliminary view where she said this is a new condition that can be imposed. That is her. They are the ones who will actually have to make the first call, right? And if she is giving that preliminary view, it means that perhaps that's the line of thinking that might emerge when a case actually comes before the court. Again, when it comes down to discrimination, we talk about the balance, talk about proportionality of the situation. How do we deal with the entire system has to work with somebody who doesn't want to be vaccinated?
But therefore, in your opinion, as an attorney, can someone challenge the decision of an employer to compel them? Yeah.
I think anyone can challenge anything depending on how they want to frame the argument. I think it will be difficult now that there is, certain mandates coming out all over the world, and the courts will have to look at cases as well all over the world to help streamline with our own legislation to decide. But so that's my view in a nutshell. I can't say for sure, but I can say that people can challenge it. I can say that a creative argument can be spun. We do it all the time when we're in court.
Yeah, because that's how precedents are set. That is how case law becomes a precedent.
Exactly.
By logic. One, if there's no previous case law, and what is in the best interest based on certain tests. So if you're looking at judicial review, whether it's reasonable, proportionate, etc.
Exactly.
Illegal, etc. So yes, it's a revolving door. And a question: safe zones. Let's say, okay, the government decides to circumvent the whole mandatory vaccination drama, with deciding that everywhere is a safe zone under public health ordinance, without passing legislation.
That would be, I can see numerous challenges happening, right? I can see a lot, because I believe the unions were talking about that already. The unions have been pushing back on the idea of safe zones. And they are saying, no, come to a determination with proper legislation. I think that's their pushback on it. They are resisting the aspect of safe zones. I think I would be cautious for anybody to implement something like that. I think that could create a lot of cases immediately. I think that would be going a little bit far. But again, that's just my view.
So tell me, why do you think that Australia or certain jurisdictions were able to implement those type of legislation or laws?
Well, I think it depends on their lawmakers as well. It depends on their parliament. It depends on people working together. They would have a different jurisdiction from us, and probably depends on the situation. Right now, our situation...
Or depends on the people.
On the people, and look at our situation.
New Zealand is they are Commonwealth jurisdiction. We don't rely on case laws from New Zealand, but it is persuasive. So therefore it boils down to the people.
It does, and I think, unfortunately, it boils down to the circumstance that we are a smaller country, and our hospitals...
everyone has a say.
Well, not only that, but our hospitals are being overrun, right?
And overwhelmed.
And overwhelmed. I say overrun, overwhelmed. And somebody will have to make a decision eventually if they're seeing the numbers go higher and higher. And I know, well, again, the data says those are mainly unvaccinated people. Again, we need all the data to come in. It could be argued that not enough people are vaccinated to know the effect, but that's how it stands right now, that the numbers are really unvaccinated people in the hospitals, and it's being overrun. So we need to think of that. We need to look at if a decision is made and a tough line decision is made, it might be made based on the fact that the internal data is we need to stop this spread now.
And employment in the workplace, particularly in light of let's look at someone who has contracted COVID and died in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
Their family member, can they now sue an employer for not providing a safe work environment?
Well, you see, that's what creates all these interesting arguments, and that's what an employer would think about.
Yes.
And that's, I said, it's going to become, so I allowed this person, I put all my distancing and masks and hand sanitizer, and this happened. Can I now be brought up because I did not provide enough of safe working environment, even though I tried everything? So
but another argument could be that, well, there are other employees who aren't vaccinated, and the employer allowed these employees to remain there, not looking at what is the overarching objective with respect to safety.
Exactly. And then we have to look at it right now. It just seems that our main line, perhaps right now, I think globally, the only line being put forward is vaccination. It's not that I know there's an experimental tablet, but that hasn't been developed yet, and that's more for treating when somebody has COVID. I've heard about it, been trying to follow the news on it, but vaccination, at least now, besides social distancing, seems the only way to at least reduce the amount of mutations and to kind of at least slow down the progression of the virus.
No, it's one, in the promo that was done on the program, there was an interesting comment by someone, and she said, if the vaccines were actually working, maybe people would be convinced to take it. Mm-hmm. The fact remains that both vaccinated and unvaccinated persons can contract and spread the virus. We need to stop making the unvaccinated the enemy. COVID-19 is the enemy. People simply need to follow the established protocols of wearing a mask, sanitizing, and being socially distant. But should the world be allowed to stay this way indefinitely?
So the thing is, there is certain merit in what she has said with respect to we might go into a safe zone, vaccinated people. Well, I'll be open, I'm vaccinated. I might go into a safe zone, and because of that, I might let down my guard, and that is wrong. No citizen
we've
vaccinated.
Seen that.
Yes.
Come on, in bars you're
Yes.
seeing where now bars are now turning to club because they have bar license, they don't have club license, but they are able to circumvent. You know, everything we do in this country, we find ways around it. And I've been in certain safe zones where literally it's a fet.
Exactly, and that's the problem. She has merit in what she said about the fact that whether you're vaccinated or not, you can contract the virus. The only difference is that, again, I've known people who have passed away from COVID, friends of mine.
Yes,
and it's been tough, and I've known people who were vaccinated, contracted the virus, and barely had any effects. Again, we're waiting for data, but personally, that's what encouraged me to get vaccinated, because I saw what happened to my friends, I saw what happened to certain people I really cared about. And that's why I believe that we need to protect each other in Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, we know that tons of data around the world, we're still waiting to have an absolute, decision, but I believe that we need to try and educate and push towards some kind of, a society where we are caring about each other a little bit more.
Personal responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And Rajiv, what next? Do you have a publication in place at the moment, or maybe something that is coming up?
Maybe, you never know. You never know. Let's see how the future goes.
Okay, great. And anything else that you want to state on the issue with respect to
No, I just want to wish everyone a happy and safe day. Have a blessed day, and let's try and take care of each other and take care of yourself.
Let's try and take care of each other and take care of yourself. Thank you so much, Rajiv, for gracing this set. I know it's been long in planning, and I know we were supposed to really speak on something else today.
Yes,
but I think this was important, and I will be inviting you back next time, because I believe in terms of custom law, and a lot of persons, that this is the season where plenty of people are now saying that, you have delays, you have customs charges in terms of how do customs charge individuals, etc., and whether or not it's fair. So that's something that we definitely need to speak about.
Anytime you're ready, you just let me know.
Thank you so much, Rajiv,
All right.
and all the best. So, guys, it's a wrap. You have been watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. We were speaking about mandatory vaccination versus public health in the workplace. So please be safe, guys. Social distance, of course, wear your mask, vaccinate, read, and just let's bring this place back to some normalcy. So thank you so much. See you next time. God bless.